Okay, and we are live. So I guess it was initially going to be a lot more of us, but looks like nobody else ended up being able to make it after all. So I'll just go ahead and introduce myself. You can introduce yourself, and we'll just see where the conversation goes. So for anybody else who's watching this, my name is Rick Morris, and this is just a meeting between a couple of former students of Anand Venkataraman. So I'm a student of his, well, really his whole C++ sequence at Foothill College. So that's CS2A to 2C, ending with Advanced Data Structures and Algorithms, I think is the name of it. And I took the class because I was trying to complete some prerequisites for Georgia Tech's online Master of Science in Computer Science with the eventual career goal of becoming a machine learning engineer. So I'm about 7/10 of the way through the Georgia Tech program right now. So that's where I am. How about you, Emily?
I just took the 2A course. I just finished it this summer, and I am currently a teacher, and I'm looking to switch to another career, or at least have options. And so I wanted to hear from someone who is in the midst of, getting that master's and your experience and that kind of thing.
Sure. So you mentioned that you were a computer science teacher. So I guess, why are you taking more computer science classes?
Yeah, so this will be my first year teaching computer science, and I just became certified to teach AP computer science. But for AP computer science, you don't actually have to know any programming.
Yeah.
And so I want that to be different for my students. I do want them to get programming experience, but it all sort of stemmed from my interest in it stemmed from there. I started taking some courses on Coursera, and then I wanted to just try some formal coursework before jumping into a new degree program.
Okay. And I mean, I know you mentioned it before we started recording. Are you comfortable saying the degree program you're looking at?
Yeah, I got accepted to two master's programs online, one through WPI and one through Syracuse. They're both online programs special for people who did an undergraduate in science. So not with the computer science background, but then to get a master's in computer science based upon that. So that would be starting in a couple weeks, I guess.
Oh, cool. Have you?
Mhm.
Okay. And do you have any thoughts on like what you'd want to specialize in, or just kind of trying things out?
I'm considering the data science route, which is slightly a different thing, but I'm also going to start doing robotics for the first time this year, so that might really spark, a different kind of, it's like, I guess I feel like at this point I don't know what I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and there's so many jobs out there that I feel like I don't even know exist that I might be interested in. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So as we also talked about, so I'm doing that MS at Georgia Tech, and I am also a career changer. Although in this case, I'm committed to changing careers. I did a PhD in philosophy before this, originally hoping to be a college professor, but it turns out that wasn't the best career move in terms of employability. So I decided to switch, and I was around the time I was realizing that maybe it wasn't going to work out. I was hearing about this data science thing that everybody's talking about, and I'd actually had the opportunity to TA for basically a course on philosophical issues in artificial intelligence, because a lot of the early papers by, I think, like Turing and some of those guys were actually published in philosophy journals, interestingly, or interesting to me. And so I thought, well, this sounds like something I could possibly do. And everybody made it sound really easy to get started. So I just decided that's what I would do as my backup plan. And I don't really know why I thought it would be easy, because it definitely hasn't been easy. It's been a journey. But yeah, but sort of similarly, because I didn't have a primary computer science background, other than some of these courses I took at Foothill, I I wanted to kind of explore around a little bit, at least in the MS, and but with kind of the thought that probably something machine learning-ish would be where I'd be interested in going, in part because that's sort of where my previous philosophy of science training kind of already gave me at least a little bit of a leg up. Whereas like if I did say a full stack web development thing, there'd be almost no application. I feel like at least here there'd be some of the same kind of training involved or related training at least. So actually, it's interesting you mentioned robotics because I took Georgia Tech's AI for robotics as my first class at Georgia Tech, and so that was that was actually that was really interesting. They've got like great testing or great assignment set up for that class where you use particle filters to guide a glider over the surface of Mars, and so it's kind of like localization and guidance type stuff. So that was really cool. And actually, the lectures are available on Udacity as far as I know for free. So if you're interested in that, that'd be something worth looking into. And of course, you shoot me an email after this or something like that if you want that. But yeah, so I've been trying to kind of double dip, like both building some machine learning chops with machine learning focused classes, but also taking enough fundamental computer science classes that I wasn't stuck with machine learning if I ended up not liking it. So I've done like an operating systems class. I've done some basic information security class, networks, stuff like that. So yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at right now. Then I did like one short-term contract last summer for the government, which was very much a learning experience because I was kind of like, I'm a habitually independent worker, which means I just kind of start, you tell me what you want something and I just go do it. And I don't really ask for further guidance, which is a terrible habit when I'm not experienced in something, which I'm not. So I learned a lot of lessons about that. Actually making sure I understood correctly what was asked of me. And it ended up taking me a lot more time than it should have because of that. So yeah, I guess that's lesson learned I can share with any viewers out there. Make sure you understand what you're being asked to do. Seems obvious now.
So if you don't mind, let's backtrack just a little bit. How was it going? How do you feel like the CS2A classes prepared you for your program now?
Sure. So I think, well, so one thing, so I did a kind of funny thing where I did both the Java sequence and the C++ sequence 1 quarter off. So I did like Java first by itself, Java 1A, and then I did Java 1B simultaneous with CS with the C++ A, and then kind of just continued that sequence through the final class for both sequences. And so I'd done that just because like I thought it'd be a little bit of repetition, but it would give me a chance to maybe see some differences between the languages, and also instead of kind of cramming in some data structures knowledge and then forgetting it by the next quarter, I would hopefully have it reinforced the next quarter by covering some of the similar material. And so I think just I'm really glad I did that. Although of course it involves some review, and I think that just helped me kind of see different ways of like get very used to like debugging and troubleshooting algorithms that I was trying to implement, looking for problems and how I implemented a data structure, and so I mean sort of like just basic foundational stuff, and got me used to like looking for a little just like edge cases and corner cases. And in C++ in particular was useful because like the operating systems class, unsurprisingly, was all in C with a little bit of C++ at the end. So because I was doing C++, I had a lot more memory management experience than I would have had I only done the Java, which is garbage collected language. So I was sort of more used to handling pointers and handling problems with memory leaks and things like that. So that ended up being a nice sort of prep for going into just like a pure C class, where you don't even have the niceties of strings in C++ or something like that. So yes, I mean it really helped out in just a lot of different ways. I think just it was a really great foundational sequence, I think, for me. How did you find the course?
From you, I think perhaps I was looking into intro to programming classes that were more formal, and Foothill happened to align with the schedule that I needed in the summer. And so I was just applying for there, and then I saw someone on Reddit recommend the C++ class specifically with this professor. And so I went ahead and I signed up for him. And I took a couple classes this summer at Dayansa, which apparently works together with Foothill. But yeah, and I just sort of like, I signed up, I actually got waitlisted on pretty much everything because I was such a late registration, and I ended up getting into Anand's at the very end, or at the very beginning of the class. And so I know that his classes are a lot, I guess I would call them project based. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's such a unique setup. I feel like that I think that's fair, but it would be hard to explain it without somebody actually looking at the nonlinear media setup.
For sure. How is that compared to your graduate school classes?
So one nice thing about Anand's approach is that sort of everything is in a sense front loaded, so you can just start working and then you just work your own pace. Well, not completely your own pace, but more or less your own pace through the course. And the way he set it up, you can really go through everything, the entire sequence if you want, the whole first year of C++ just at your own pace without even being in the course. So it's nice to have a real good, a very effective testing harness that's set up there. Everything builds really effectively. And so I think that's definitely a little bit different than most of the courses that I've taken so far at Georgia Tech. Mainly, I think because there, in the master's classes, there's a lot of kind of, okay, we're going to focus on this, like in the machine learning class, we're going to focus on supervised learning. Okay, we've done that. Now we're going to focus on, unsupervised learning. Okay, we've done that. And you might use some of the same data sets or have some overlapping issues or reuse some of your code, but it doesn't build in quite the same way. And that's not really even a criticism of the other classes. It's just the nature of teaching multiple subjects kind of in one class. But I think it's nice on instead of because it builds so clearly and sequentially. So yeah, very easy to kind of stay organized and stay where kind of keep track of where you are. I think it's a useful approach.
What about in terms of rigor?
So it's sort of hard for me to say because I definitely found honors courses quite challenging. Now, if I went back and did them, hopefully they would be much easier for me now than they were then. So I would say that my experience of them is that they were pretty similarly challenging for me at the time that most of my classes now are at this time. So I think they're probably like appropriately challenging, but very much doable. They're not like I wasn't it wasn't like having a full-time job or something like that, like some of the courses that I've taken, or almost full-time job like some of the courses I've taken in the master's. So it's reasonably paced, reasonable content load, but definitely not something where I felt like I could slack off or just kind of knock it all out in a weekend ahead of time. How did you?
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, how did you find basically the same question?
I guess I feel I have sort of learned, like, even through the Coursera courses, learning program is just struggling all the time. Like, and like you said, then you go back and you're like, oh, yeah, this is easy. And I was actually, I just finished 2A, and now I'm trying to go back and just get all the other points and just what did I miss? And even then I look back and I'm like, of course this didn't work last time. And so I guess as if it's the same struggle, it's the more you know, the more you figure out you don't know kind of thing. But yeah, I do find them pretty rigorous, but some of it is that independent aspect that you talked about. There's not someone you can just immediately turn to and be like, why, explain this to me, or why doesn't this work? And I'm not sure how effective that would be anyway, but I do find it rather rigorous, and I was wondering, am I going to be like totally over my head once, I do start in the master's class, the master's program beyond the like introductory part.
Yeah, well, so I can't say what your experience in your programs will be like, but um, maybe this isn't humble. I don't know. I have maintained a 4.0, so far 7 classes out of 10 in, with a mix of classes broadly considered easier and broadly considered harder. So I think probably you should expect to be fine. Uh, it was good training for the masters, definitely. Honestly, I think one of the things that I struggle with more than anything is sort of like you said, the more you know, the more you know, learn, the more you kind of realize how much there is still is to learn. And I feel kind of maybe panicky overstates it, but almost like just overwhelmed sometimes, thinking like um, just how much there's to learn. Right, in machine learning, there's data pipelines, there's actual algorithms, there's data cleaning, there's how do you deploy a model to production. There's like all these different steps, each of which you could basically build a career around, or you could try to but you have to kind of understand all of it. Um, and then yeah, I mean, so I'm like trying to learn those pieces, but gotta practice my leak code for the job interviews, so I'm like working on that. And so it's yeah, I don't know if you've had that experience as well of just feeling sort of overwhelmed, but I think actually one thing that computer science is great training for is the ability to kind of like look and say, I have no idea how I'm going to do all that, but I think I can do this tiny part down here.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And I'm on some of the computer science subreddits, and I'm like, I don't get that at all, what they're saying, but I think someday I will, which is, I think, an optimistic feeling. So did you say that you are working full time right now, or you were?
So right now, I am so so basically I sort of tried to time everything so my wife and I could have kids, and then I could just stay home with them because she already had she's a psychologist, so she already has a solid career going. And so when I started at Foothill, my son, who's now 3 and a bit, he was about 4 months old or 5 months old. And my daughter was born. Actually, she's turning one a week from today, as it happens. Um, so, um, so I've been mostly home with them, and then in my copious spare time, I've been taking classes. So I've actually been doing um, the MS much more slowly than I probably could have. I could probably be about done with it by now, but I definitely could be done with it by now. But um, just it's been more bearable doing one class at a time, 2 classes at a time a year ago, and that was pretty. And those are two easier classes, and it was still quite busy with a newborn at home. Imagine that. So that's been my full time work, and what I'm hoping is that maybe to score an internship for next summer, and then either finish up in the fall and then full time after that, or if I don't get an internship, just finish up next summer and then just focus on the job hunt. So I probably got about another year of this sort of mix of stay-at-home dad kind of, but also kind of doing some studying, and then I'm going to go from there. So hopefully the recruiters won't hold that too much against me that I've got a little bit of this work gap here.
I think that, I mean, I'm sure the internships mean a lot. That seems to be what I've gathered. And I'm hoping to do one next summer. So did that government contract you talked about, was that basically an internship?
So the way they put it is, legally, this is not an internship. And I don't fully understand all the details, but I guess like they sort of are able to pay people for cheap work, essentially. That as long as it's actual legitimate work, they can pay people a small amount for services. And so the way it normally works is they then kind of, the person you work with will then kind of supervise you. So it's sort of it's internship-esque, but it is legally not an internship, and they've made this extremely clear. is legally different from an internship. So it was intended to be kind of like a project that would be achievable for somebody who is still in school. And yeah, and it was just there's just communications issues. I think honestly on both ends, um, for how it ended up working out. So it was a really valuable experience, just because I got a lot of chances to both find some of my own professional weaknesses in this discipline, and and uh, and so things to kind of watch out for, mistakes I'm more likely to make. In this case, it was a project in C sharp, which was not a language that I had ever used before. So I got to kind of learn a new language, and do like interactions with like RESTful APIs. So basically, it was like a data downloading, utility that they wanted me to write. So yeah, so I mean, it's like I said, internship esque, it's work experience, but formally not an actual internship. So yeah,
Did it count towards your government retirement years?
no, no, no. It was like an independent contract, so I was not a government employee. I was paid
Oh,
as an
okay.
outside contractor. Yeah.
How did you end up finding it? Are you in California still?
Yes. Yes. I'm
Okay.
in the Sacramento area right now.
Okay.
So um, so actually a friend of mine from church works for this particular government agency, knew that I was in classes, and so he said, "Hey, we do this thing where we, we'll sometimes work with people from the local university to do some work for us. Would you be interested?" So that's what I ended up doing, and then I actually ended up working for one of his coworkers, rather than my friend directly. Um, but yeah, so it was very much a networking thing more than a just applying and getting interviewed kind of process. So I guess that's like another lesson, uh, as much about networking and getting to know people. So I joined the local Sacramento Tech's Slack channels and stuff like that, in order to try and build out my network. Because that's a hard thing to do too, with kids, because you don't really have time to socialize or go out to meetups. So it's been figuring that out has also been a challenge as well. How have you found it? So working full time. Well, I guess was this summer your first time taking classes while working?
So I actually just moved to California last year, and I had to take a couple master's level courses to get my certification in California. So this past year while I was teaching, I took one class at a time, but these classes are a lot more like humanities type stuff, and so just reading and writing papers. And so I did that while working during the regular school year. And then this summer I did summer school while taking I ended up taking 3 classes. I did this class, and then over at Deonta, I did an intro to Python, which it turns out I didn't really need it. And then I did intro to SQL, just to sort of dip my toe in that. And it was a lot, because I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. Yeah, my 1-year-old's she'll be 2 in a couple months though, so a little bit older. But yeah, it is. I feel like, I don't know about you, but anytime my computer's open, my kids are right here, like wanting to push buttons on the keyboard and play games. And even my 1-year-old, when she sees me, she just wants to come sit. And so it really, it has to be done. Like, either last year I would sort of stay late at work sometimes and just get work done while at school, or coming back here and then go getting them from their school. Because I'm fortunate my school gets out a little earlier. And so, yeah, but it was like, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, it's like, this is the time you have, so that's what you have to do. There's no time to procrastinate when it's like this. For your internship next summer, you think you're going to go for a more traditional internship then?
I'm going to try. Yeah, I mean, we'll see exactly how everything goes, but I'd like to try for a more traditional internship, ideally still remote, so I can maintain some of the flexibility. But yeah, I'm hoping for like a traditional internship that nobody will argue is an internship, and ideally too with just more mentorship, because I think that's something that I just don't really have right now. My dad was actually a software engineer, So so there's some things I can talk to him about. Um, like my leak code problems or something like that. I can talk about a solution that I came up with, or what the problem is or something. But he's not. I mean, he's been retired for about 5 years now, and um, he was more involved on like the networking side of things. So machine learning, he basically knows what I tell him about it for the most part. So like there's some mentorship elements that can still happen there, fortunately, and it's a nice father son kind of bonding thing. But yeah, in terms of really applicable, like, oh, you don't know this tech stack or something like that, that's something really important. That's not really something that he can advise me on. So I'm hoping that will help as well with getting a traditional internship. But of course, I'll apply to big boy jobs as well at that time, because I'm not going to argue. If somebody wants to hire me without an internship, I'm not gonna fight with them about that. Um, Actually, it's funny you mentioned about. I think it was your kids wanting to come over and type, because my son, the 3-year-old, he will actually. What he really likes to do is to come over and I'll open up like a notepad document for him and just maximize it. I have to turn on music that he recognizes as my study music. So like, the binaural beats or whatever, just kind of like new agey something that with no words. I have to turn that on, and then he sits there and he mashes keys for the notepad document. And of course, I have to troubleshoot if he gets into any problems by hitting the Alt key too many times or whatever. But that's a way that I've found to kind of that he likes it, and then he kind of gets bored after 5 or 10 minutes, and then um, I'm unfortunately distractible enough that I can't really work if there's any people activity going on. But that at least helps with some of the curiosity. My 1-year-old, she'll come over, and so she's walking, but she's just tall enough to reach the keyboard, and so she'll kind of reach up like this and then kind of mash keys over her head. I initially just thought she was just grabbing on, but I think she's actually mashing keys, like she thinks that I do. So it's very fun and extremely charming and cute, as I'm sure you know. But yes, it's also very challenging to be able to focus, and everybody's finally in bed, the house is quiet, it's 9 or 10, and now I start doing stuff. It's definitely tricky. um, yeah.
Yeah, that was I had a final at 8 p.m. one evening, and it was like my 1-year-old just would not go to sleep. And so I mean, she was teething, but it was just like it is a really big challenge. And then in most of my classes this summer, I don't know if you experienced it at all, but I feel like almost all the students were in high school. And so especially as like someone who's, this would be my second career, um like I'm significantly older. And so that was a little something I had to not get in my head about, especially as a high school teacher. Like these are literally, normally I'm the one in charge in this room, and instead now I'm in a room full of high schoolers who are doing very well, which is really great. But have you experienced anything like that in your master's program? Are you in contact with any of your classmates? Do you have to do projects, anything like that?
So most of my classmates, I feel like have felt more like most of my classmates in the masters have felt more like peers to me. Um, a lot of them are already professionals in the fields, so they're, if not my age, which is 37, if anybody's curious, they're at least sort of ballparky, like they're full grown-ups. And then there's also a bunch of people like me, who are kind of later stage career changers. So the masters, it really hasn't been. I mean, of course, there are like the people who are fresh out of college and just go right into the masters. So there are those people too. That hasn't really felt too different. I do sometimes. I think it's actually more like cruising, like lurking on Reddit and seeing the 24, 25-year-olds who are already like well into a career that I haven't even started yet. And I think there's like a little bit of a feeling sometimes of like that I've sort of fallen well, in some sense I guess I am behind, but yeah, and I think that's something I just have to kind of like, it'll be okay, whatever, doesn't really matter. um but yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a little bit different. I think because I've never been in. Well, actually, no. So when I TA'd, I guess, yeah, I did, of course, have I had college students, and so um, that was, I mean, I was used to sort of being in charge of that age range, but I'd actually occasionally have people kind of like older than me who'd come in who'd be going back for a bachelor's or something like that. And so, I mean, those are actually, I mean, so those are some of the best students in my experience because they know what they're doing. They're not, they're not out there doing all the things that college students do. They've got their family at home and they're like, you know, they sit right in the front row. They take copious notes. They come in and they ask you every question. It's real fun. As a teacher, it's really, really fun to have people like that. Um, but yeah, I guess I haven't, well, I think taking classes at Foothill, I took them all online. So I just kind of, in my head, I pictured everybody as essentially, another, career changer or something like that, even though I'm sure a lot of them were, 20 years younger than me. And good for them. Good for you. You were very smart, and I wish I had done what you all are doing now out there. So we are running up on time here. So I will stop the recording in just a second here. But is there anything else? Any closing thoughts you had, or I don't know, experiences you thought would be valuable to share with maybe Anna's next group of students or anybody else?
I was wondering why you chose Georgia Tech.
So initially, I had planned to just be a self-learner, and I think I came across it, and because I had thought about getting a master's, and before it's just sort of a way to make it easier to get interviews and things like that, rather than trying to do a project-based thing. But most of them had specifically required you have to have a bachelor's in computer science or electrical engineering, something very, very close, not negotiable, or you have to have 90% of the curriculum done even if you didn't have a major. And I mean, coming from a humanities background, I had nothing. So it seemed like Georgia Tech's kind of attitude was like, the strong will survive, kind of. So you can come in, possibly. I mean, if you really don't have the background, they won't let you in. But as long as you have like something of a foundation, you'll probably be admitted. And then just kind of on you to succeed. And so that was something that seemed more feasible, or at least I wanted to see if I could get into that before then doing a more traditional route or self-teaching or something like that. That's why I ended up doing Georgia Tech specifically rather than either one of the other online programs or just going to a local master's, in-person master's. Seemed more flexible, seemed like they'd be a little more forgiving of my background, and turns out they were. So
How's the time change or time difference?
oh, time difference. Normally they compensate for it and just have like something is due at midnight anywhere on earth kind of policy. So sometimes it's due at whatever 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or something like that. But even then, that I think that what that ends up panning out to is midnight anywhere on earth the night before. So you just have to kind of the time change is really not too bad. They sort of compensate it fairly, I think. So yeah, so I mean, I think the program is great, and would definitely, if anybody's interested in it, they should definitely look into it. But yeah, yeah, I think so we've got basically a minute left on the whole thing. So I'm just gonna say bye to everybody now. I'll stop the recording and then I'll say goodbye. So bye everybody.
Bye.
Take care.